Ancient sailors crossed entire oceans without any maps or instruments. They were the Bronze Age Navigators, and their story is one of the greatest forgotten adventures in human history. By the end of this journey, you will understand exactly how they charted the world using only the sun, the stars, and the sea itself. How did they find tiny islands in a vast, empty ocean? What secrets did they memorize to keep from getting hopelessly lost? We are about to recover a lost art of wayfinding that connected the ancient world. What do you think it truly takes to navigate by intuition alone? Think of a world without borders, at least not the kind we know. This was the Bronze Age, a time when great civilizations were not defined by walls but by waves. From around 3000 BC to 1000 BC, a restless energy spread across the Mediterranean and beyond. It was an era of unprecedented connection, driven by a simple, powerful need. Societies were advancing, and with that advancement came a hunger for resources that their own lands could not supply. The most crucial of these were metals. Copper and tin, when smelted together, created bronze, the alloy that gave the age its name and its power. But these metals were rarely found in the same place. Tin, especially, was extraordinarily rare. This scarcity sparked an incredible chain of events. It compelled people to look past the horizon and venture into the great, unknown blue. This is where our master navigators emerge from the mists of history. The Minoans of Crete built lavish palaces and a powerful fleet, their ships laden with pottery and olive oil, setting out across the eastern Mediterranean. The Mycenaeans of mainland Greece followed, their influence stretching across the sea, but perhaps the most legendary of all were the Phoenicians. Hailing from the coast of what is now Lebanon, they became the undisputed merchants of the ancient world. Their sturdy ships, powered by both oar and sail, did not just hug the coastline. They pushed further, founding trading posts from North Africa to Spain, and some stories even say they circumnavigated Africa itself. They were after the valuable purple dye from sea snails, silver from Spain, and most importantly, that elusive tin, which historians believe they sourced from as far away as Cornwall in the British Isles. These journeys were not casual trips. They were perilous, months-long undertakings into a world without safety nets. A single navigational error meant vanishing forever. This immense risk is what forged the art of wayfinding. It was not a hobby or an abstract science. It was a complete, living system of knowledge, a carefully guarded profession passed from parent to child. A wayfinder was the most valuable person on any ship, a human computer storing vast libraries of information about the natural world. Their mind was their map, and their survival depended on its accuracy. They learned to read the subtle messages written in the ocean currents, the flight patterns of birds, and the very feel of the wind. But their primary guide, their constant and reliable chart, was hanging above them in the sky. To understand how they used it, we must now look up and see the heavens through their eyes. The horizon bleeds from black to gold, and for the Bronze Age navigator standing on the deck, this daily spectacle was not just beauty. It was data. The sun's unwavering emergence from the east provided the first and most critical line on their mental chart. It gave them an absolute reference in a world of relative motion, allowing them to set their course for the day with a simple but profound act of observation. They knew the sun would arc across the sky and settle into the west, creating a reliable east-west axis they could trust completely. But their use of the sun went far beyond simple direction. At the peak of its daily journey, when it reached its highest point, the navigator would note its altitude. This was their key to unlocking latitude. A higher sun meant they were closer to the equator. A lower sun meant they were farther north. They could estimate this height with astonishing accuracy using nothing more than their own hand, measuring how many finger widths the sun was above the horizon. On a calm day, they might even plant a stick upright in the deck, watching the shadow it cast. The length and direction of that shadow told them not only the time of day, but also confirmed their cardinal directions. Archaeologists have found notched discs and carefully carved stones that may have served as portable solar markers, allowing for more precise measurements. Ancient texts like the Epic of Gilgamesh speak of Shamash, the sun god, as a divine guide for travelers, a poetic echo of this very real navigational dependence. Of course, this system was not without its perils. A bank of clouds could shroud their primary guide for days, and the sun's path itself shifted with the seasons, rising and setting at slightly different points along the horizon throughout the year. This required a deep, memorized knowledge passed down through generations. A master wayfinder knew the sun's dance by heart, compensating for its seasonal wanderings instinctively. This intimate, constant dialogue with our star underscores a fundamental truth about these sailors. They were not fighting against nature, but reading its rhythms as one would read a familiar map. And when that primary map faded with the dusk, they simply turned to a new one, etched in a million points of light. When the sun vanished, the true map of the ocean revealed itself. A master navigator standing beneath a clear night sky was never lost, but surrounded by a celestial compass of breathtaking precision. They recognized not just random stars, but entire families of light, like the Great Bear, Ursa Major, or the Hunter, Orion. In the Northern Hemisphere, one star held a unique and vital position. Polaris, the North Star, remained almost motionless, a fixed point of brilliant white around which the entire cosmos appeared to slowly turn. By locating this unwavering star, a sailor could instantly determine true north, a constant reference in a shifting world, but their knowledge was far more intricate than a single direction. They understood the pathways of other constellations, how they rose and set at specific points on the horizon at different times of the year. The appearance of certain stars signaled seasonal changes, telling a navigator it was time to begin a voyage or to seek shelter. This celestial science was perfected across the globe. In the Mediterranean, sailors memorized the risings and settings of key stars to guide them between islands and along coasts. In the vast Pacific, Polynesian wayfinders developed an even more complex system, a mental star compass dividing the horizon into 32 sections, each marked by a specific star's rising or setting point. They did not just follow one star, but navigated by a succession of them, steering their vessel so that one guiding star remained positioned over a particular part of the canoe as it rose, then switching to the next star as the first one set. This created a star path, a highway of light across the night sky. These star paths were their mental charts, allowing them to sail for thousands of miles across the open Pacific, finding specks of land with stunning accuracy. They tracked the subtle movements of these celestial bodies throughout the night, using them not just for direction but also to sense shifts in weather, as certain atmospheric conditions could make the stars twinkle differently. This stellar mastery was not mere observation. It was a deep, living partnership with the cosmos, a sophisticated astronomy written in memory and song. Yet the sky was only part of their guidance system, for the ocean beneath their hulls was constantly speaking to them in a language of its own. The ocean itself held a rhythm, a deep and steady pulse that a seasoned navigator could feel through the very planks of the ship. Even on the calmest, most featureless days, when the sky was a uniform gray and the stars were hidden, the sea was never truly still. It was crisscrossed by swells, vast, powerful waves generated by distant weather systems and steady winds hundreds of miles away. These swells were the ocean's enduring highways, and a master wayfinder learned to read their direction with his entire body. He would lie down in the canoe, feeling the vessels rise and fall, sensing the dominant swells push from the northeast or the southeast. This consistent motion became his true north when all else failed, a deep, rhythmic compass that never disappeared. This knowledge went far beyond simple direction. As a vessel approached an island, long before any palm trees broke the horizon, the swells would begin to change. Their steady roll would be interrupted by a new pattern, a complex interplay of waves. The main swell would hit the submerged slopes of the island and reflect back, creating a smaller, confused sea that bounced against the incoming waves. An experienced navigator, feeling this subtle interference through the hull, would know land was near. He could even interpret the specific pattern to guess the island's size and the direction of its coastline. Oral histories from Pacific navigators are filled with such moments, where a master would announce landfall a full day before anyone else could see it, simply by reading the unique signature of the waves. They learned to distinguish between the deep ocean swells, the local wind-driven waves, and the telltale reflected waves that whispered of an unseen shore. This intimate connection to the sea's movements was not a gift, but a skill honed through years, often decades, of patient observation and direct mentorship. A young apprentice would spend countless hours simply watching the water, learning to identify the subtle differences between a swell from the east and one from the west. He would be taught to sense the slightest shift that indicated the ship was drifting off course, a correction made by feeling the waves strike the hull at a new angle. This was a holistic art, a complete immersion in the living environment. The navigator did not see himself as separate from the ocean and sky, but as a part of a single communicative system. Every ripple, every shift in the wind, every bird that crossed the bow was a piece of a grand navigable whole. And sometimes the most reliable guides were not the grand forces of the cosmos, but the creatures that lived between the sea and the sky. A steady wind was more than a convenience, it was the engine of the ancient world. Bronze Age mariners did not just endure the wind, they learned its language, mapping the great, invisible rivers of air that flowed across the oceans with a reliability that bordered on law. They came to know the seasonal monsoons of the Indian Ocean, which blew from the southwest for half the year, carrying ships from Africa toward India, and then reversed to blow from the northeast, bringing them home again. In the Mediterranean, they timed their voyages to the Artesian winds, the dependable northerlies that blew each summer, perfectly suited for sailing south to Egypt or east along the coast. Historical records hint that the Phoenicians scheduled their entire trading calendar around these winds, turning a natural force into a predictable maritime highway. To read the wind's subtle cues, they used simple, brilliant tools. A piece of cloth or a woven cord tied high on the mast served as a constant windsock, showing direction at a glance. But their observation went deeper. They watched the way smoke from a cooking fire on a beach behaved, or studied the formation and speed of clouds, understanding that different cloud types could foretell a coming squall or a long period of fair weather. This hard-won knowledge of atmospheric patterns was far too precious to be left to chance or fragile parchment. It was encoded into the culture itself, woven into songs and chants that were easier to memorize than a written log. In the Pacific, entire genealogies of wind and weather were passed down in rhythmic verses, teaching each new generation the precise timing of seasonal shifts. Some cultures even used navigational stones not as physical charts, but as memory aids, where each stone represented a specific wind or current and their relationship to one another. This mastery of the wind represents a profound shift in our understanding of these sailors. They were not just reacting to the weather, they were forecasting it, integrating long-term meteorological observations into a grand, strategic plan for crossing the sea. It was a partnership with the atmosphere itself, and just as they trusted the winds, they placed their faith in other, more mobile guides who shared their world, creatures who knew the paths to land better than any human. A tired sailor on a long voyage would watch the sky not just for stars but for wings. The most hopeful sight at dusk was not a constellation, but a flock of birds flying purposefully toward the horizon. These were not lost wanderers, they were commuters heading home to roost, and a master navigator knew their schedules by heart. He could identify species by their flight patterns, understanding that a tern flying high and straight was likely making a long journey back to an island, while a frigate bird circling near the ship might be fishing just a short distance from its coastal nest. Each bird was a living signpost. Terns, for instance, often ventured dozens of miles from land, so spotting one meant an island was within a day's sail. The magnificent frigate bird, however, rarely rested on the water and would always return to its home island at night, making it a perfect, reliable guide. This knowledge was so critical that ancient mariners developed a clever test for when they were truly disoriented. They carried land-based birds with them in cages. If they were unsure of the direction to land, they would release one of these birds. A bird that circled the ship aimlessly indicated that no land was near, but a bird that flew off swiftly in a straight line gave them a course to follow. This technique is famously recounted in the story of Noah's Ark and was used by the Lapita people as they island hopped across the vast Pacific, and by early Mediterranean explorers pushing beyond known waters. Beyond daily foraging, the grand spectacle of seasonal bird migrations offered another layer of navigational intelligence. The predictable arrival and departure of certain species acted as a natural calendar, signaling the right time to embark on long voyages between known lands. This avian guidance system dramatically reduced the existential risk of the open ocean. It turned the empty expanse into a space inhabited by known creatures with known behaviors. A navigator's sharp eyes, trained to interpret the slightest flutter of a wing, could find a path where others saw only hopeless blue. This deep observation of life extended beyond the air, down into the water itself, where other creatures offered their own silent directions. The ocean's surface was a living map, and its inhabitants were the moving landmarks. A sudden, playful pod of dolphins was more than a welcome distraction. It was a critical data point. Bronze Age sailors knew that certain dolphins preferred specific coastal waters, so their presence often hinted that land was not far away. Even more telling were the fish themselves. A navigator peering into the clear blue would note the species swimming near his vessel. The appearance of reef-dwelling fish, creatures that never strayed far from the safety of coral, was a sure sign of shallow waters and an approaching shoreline. In contrast, a school of open ocean tuna indicated they were sailing over the deep, abyssal plains, far from any hidden shoals. The largest creatures of all, the whales, offered guidance on a grander scale. These leviathans followed ancient, predictable migration routes across the seas. A navigator who recognized a particular whale species might, in effect, be following a submerged, living highway that connected one part of the ocean to another. Even the plant life held clues. Patches of floating seaweed, like the sargassum of the Atlantic, could indicate the meeting point of two major currents, a convergence zone rich with marine life and a potential signpost for a specific maritime route. This profound understanding of marine ecology was not guesswork. It was a science of observation passed down through countless voyages. Ethnographic studies of traditional Polynesian navigators, who still practice these ancient methods today, reveal the stunning depth of this knowledge. They can name hundreds of fish species and know exactly how far each one ventures from land. They understand that the ocean is not a uniform blue, but a tapestry of shifting colors. A dark blue might signify the deep ocean trench, while a lighter, greener hue often signals the presence of a shallow lagoon or a submerged atoll, reflecting the color of the seabed below. This multi-sensory toolkit transformed the sea from a terrifying void into a readable, almost familiar landscape. Every flicker of silver in the water, every shift from deep blue to turquoise, was another piece of the puzzle. This intimate reliance on the entire ecosystem reveals a truth we have largely forgotten, that the most sophisticated navigation system ever devised was not built from metal, but forged from a deep, respectful connection to the living world. And to hold this complex web of knowledge in their minds, these master wayfinders developed a few simple yet brilliant physical aids. A master navigator's most vital tool was a simple piece of wood. In the hands of a skilled practitioner, a small, rectangular board called a camel could unlock the secrets of latitude with stunning precision. Its design was a marvel of simplicity. A card, often just a few inches wide, was tied to a long string. The string itself was the key, with knots tied at specific intervals representing known latitudes of different islands or coastal landmarks. To use it, the navigator would hold the string taut between his teeth and move the card closer or farther from his eye until its bottom edge aligned with the horizon and its top edge touched a specific guiding star like Polaris. When the card perfectly framed the star against the sea's edge, he would check which knot on the string rested at the tip of his nose. That knot told him his exact latitude, his north-south position on the Great Ocean Chart. This simple act of measurement transformed an abstract celestial height into a concrete number, a line of position he could follow east or west until he made landfall. While the camel is best documented from later Arab navigators in the Indian Ocean, its principle is so fundamental that similar devices almost certainly existed in the Bronze Age. Archaeologists have uncovered notched discs and carefully shaped stones from Minoan and Phoenician sites that defy easy classification. Some of these objects, when held at arm's length, perfectly correspond to the angular height of major stars above the horizon. They were likely the personal, pocket-sized computers of their day, physical memory, aids for a science that was otherwise carried entirely in the mind. Their practicality was perfect for an era without accessible writing materials at sea. A navigator did not need parchment or a stylus. He needed a tool that was durable, floating, and impossible to lose overboard when tied to his person. The knowledge of which star to measure for which destination and what that measurement should be was part of the oral tradition, sung in chants and repeated until it became instinct. This innovation marks a quiet revolution, the moment a sailor moved from purely observational wayfinding to actively measuring his world. It was a bridge between the art of reading nature's signs and the science of quantifying them, a crucial step that would eventually lead to the cross-staff and the sextant. Yet even with this clever tool in hand, the navigator's greatest challenge remained, plotting a course across the open sea where no single landmark could be seen for weeks. A navigator staring at the empty horizon still knew where he was, or at least where he should be. His mind was a constant calculator, integrating the two most fundamental variables of any journey, speed and time. This mental process is known as dead reckoning, the art of estimating your current position based on a previously known location. It began with judging the ship's speed. Sailors did this by observing the water itself, watching the pattern and speed of bubbles and debris flowing past the hull in the ship's wake. Some might have tossed a log overboard and timed how long it took to pass from bow to stern, a simple but effective human scale speedometer. With an estimated speed held in mind, the next challenge was time. In the open ocean, they tracked the passage of days by the sun's arc and the nights by the movement of star groups across the sky. For shorter, more precise intervals, they relied on sandglasses, turning them over each half hour to mark the watch. Multiplying this estimated speed by the elapsed time gave them the distance traveled, a line drawn on their mental chart from their last known point. It was a brilliant, continuous guess, the foundation of every long voyage. The Phoenician expedition that may have circumnavigated Africa around 600 BC would have depended utterly on this method for months, their plotted course a fragile thread of calculations stretching across thousands of miles of unknown sea. Yet dead reckoning was notoriously vulnerable. A constant, unseen current could be pushing the ship sideways, adding miles of unregistered drift each day. A strong wind could slow their progress or speed it up, skewing their time and distance estimates. This is where the Wayfinder's holistic training proved vital. He was constantly cross-referencing his dead reckoning position with every other cue the environment offered. If his mental calculation said they should be in deep ocean water, but he started seeing reef fish and a lighter blue tint to the sea, he knew a current had pushed them off course. If his star measurements showed a different latitude than his dead reckoning suggested, he would trust the stars and reset his starting point. This constant correction was the navigator's true skill, a form of real-time error checking that turned a flawed estimate into a reliable guide. It demanded immense mental discipline, the ability to hold multiple numbers, observations, and sensations in mind simultaneously, performing complex math without pen or paper. This cognitive load was not for the faint of heart. It was a skill forged through years of mentorship and brutal, practical experience. How could such a complex and perishable science, this living library of knowledge, possibly survive from one generation to the next without being lost to the waves? The navigator's knowledge was a treasure too vital to be written down. It lived instead in the rhythm of his breath and the melody of his voice. Picture an elder and his apprentice sitting by the fire, not with scrolls or maps, but with a chant passed down through countless generations. This was no simple song. It was a living library, a precise verbal map of the sea. Each rhythmic line encoded a star path, a seasonal wind, or the sequence of islands on a long voyage. The chant for a journey from Tahiti to Hawaii, for instance, would name the guiding stars to follow, describe the shift in swell patterns halfway through, and list every island that should appear on the horizon in perfect order. These chants were mnemonic marvels, turning abstract data into unforgettable stories. A complex list of 32 star bearings became a narrative of the gods sailing across the night sky. The distinct sound of waves crashing on a specific island's windward coast was described with poetic onomatopoeia, making it impossible to confuse with any other shore. In Polynesian tradition, entire genealogies of the ocean were preserved this way. A master wayfinder could recite a chant that detailed a 2,000-mile journey, pinpointing each celestial marker and the expected number of nights between landmarks, all without a single written word. This method of preservation was incredibly resilient. While a parchment could burn or be lost at sea, a song lived in the minds of many. It was a shared cultural possession, ensuring that even if a storm claimed an entire crew of master navigators, the knowledge survived in the community. This system highlights a profound truth that navigation was never a solitary genius at work. It was a collective human endeavor, a chain of memory stretching back through time. The apprentice learning the chant was not just memorizing facts, he was being woven into that chain, becoming the next link in a story that connected his people to the vast ocean. This cultural transmission was the ultimate safeguard, the reason this incredible art did not vanish. It makes you wonder, what other vast sciences have we lost because they were never set to a rhythm we could all remember? Even a master of the open ocean could breathe easier when the silhouette of a familiar mountain broke the horizon. This was coastal piloting, the art of using the land itself as a final, unmistakable guide. After weeks of navigating by stars and swells, the sight of a distinctive peak, a uniquely shaped cliff, or the dark mouth of a river was the ultimate confirmation that their mental calculations had been true. These landmarks were the signposts of their world, meticulously memorized and described in oral tradition. A navigator approaching the coast of Greece, for instance, would look for the unmistakable profile of Mount Etna smoking in the distance, a towering beacon that signaled the island of Sicily. In the western Mediterranean, the twin promontories known as the Pillars of Hercules, modern-day Gibraltar and Jebel Musa, served as a grand natural gateway. Passing between these colossal cliffs meant leaving the familiar Mediterranean and entering the vast, terrifying Atlantic, a momentous transition marked by the very shape of the land. This knowledge was not just about grand geography, it was about practical survival. A specific, oddly colored stretch of sand might indicate a hidden, treacherous reef, while a grove of a particular tree could point the way to a sheltered cove and a vital freshwater spring. Early maps, like those scratched onto clay tablets by the Minoans, were less about scale and more about sequencing these memorable landmarks, creating a visual chant of the coast. This method, however, had one profound limitation. It was useless in the deep ocean, far from any sight of land. Coastal piloting was the final act of a long journey, the crucial skill for threading a ship through rocky passages and into a safe harbor. It demonstrates how these navigators seamlessly integrated their celestial and oceanic science with intimate local knowledge. Every coastline was a story they had learned by heart, a chapter in the grand mental atlas that guided their world. A master navigator's mind held a chart more detailed than any parchment could capture. This mental map was a living, three-dimensional model of the ocean, built over a lifetime of voyages and stories. It wove together the star paths for each season, the feel of the dominant swells from different directions, the flight routes of specific seabirds, and even legendary tales of sea monsters or submerged lands that served as warnings or landmarks. These were not just lists of facts, but an interconnected cognitive system. A navigator did not merely recall that a certain star rose over a particular island. He knew the song that described the journey there, a chant that included the color shift in the water 3 days out and the specific type of turn that would appear as the destination neared. Cognitive anthropologists studying traditional wayfinders today note that this knowledge is stored in a highly spatial and relational way. The ocean is not remembered as an empty blue plain, but as a network of what some cultures called sea roads or invisible pathways. These were conceptual highways, each with its own set of environmental signposts. One road might be defined by following the star called the Great Fish, while feeling a specific swell from the southeast and watching for a certain migratory bird at a particular phase of the moon. This abstract organization of space was their true genius. It allowed for incredible flexibility when conditions changed. If a storm blew a ship off its intended star path, the navigator was not lost. He would recalibrate by finding a new star that belonged to the same road or by feeling for the swell pattern that defined that maritime corridor. His mental map was not a single rigid route, but a web of interconnected possibilities. He could be disoriented for days, yet once he recognized just one reliable cue, whether it was a familiar bird or a distinct watercolor, the entire cognitive chart would snap back into place, showing him his position within the grand network of sea roads. This reveals the profound mental training behind the art. A wayfinder was not a passive traveler. He was an active participant in a constant dialogue with his environment, his mind a sophisticated instrument for processing a stream of natural data. This cognitive mastery, however, would have been useless without a ship tough enough to carry it across the open sea. The navigator's sophisticated mental map was useless without a vessel capable of surviving the open ocean. These were not simple riverboats, but masterpieces of wooden engineering, designed from the keel up for endurance and observation. The most advanced ships, like those of the Phoenicians, were built with a strong, flexible hull made from cedar planks, tightly fitted and caulked with pitch to keep the relentless sea at bay. A single, large square sail made of woven linen or papyrus captured the wind for the long hauls, while a bank of oars provided crucial maneuverability in tight harbors and during the dreaded calms. This hybrid design gave them the versatility to cross vast distances and then deftly approach an unknown shore. The ship itself was a navigational instrument. Its very shape was a response to the sea's language. A deep, sturdy hull could ride the powerful ocean swells rather than be overwhelmed by them, giving the navigator a stable platform from which to read the waves. The mast was more than just a pole for the sail. It was an observation tower. A wayfinder would often climb to the masthead, gaining a crucial few extra feet of altitude to spot distant bird flights, cloud formations over unseen islands, or the subtle discoloration of the water that signaled a shallow reef. From this vantage point, the horizon was clearer and the stars felt closer. Archaeological evidence brings this picture to life. The Uluburan shipwreck, discovered off the coast of Turkey and dating to the late 14th century B.C., was a time capsule of Bronze Age trade. Its hull was filled with a staggering cargo: 10 tons of copper ingots from Cyprus, tin from afar, ebony, ivory, and glass. But it also held the personal tools of the crew, including balance weights for trade and, suggestively, a collection of disc-shaped stones with central holes. While their exact use is debated, such objects could have served as net weights or, quite possibly, as primitive navigational aids for measuring angles, or even as part of a dead reckoning system to track speed. The ship's layout was meticulously organized to support the navigator's work. Storage jars of water and wine were secured amidships for stability, while the steering oar at the stern gave the helmsman a clear view forward, following the navigator's gestured commands. Every aspect of the vessel, from the strength of its hull to the height of its mast, was part of an integrated system, a symbiotic relationship between human intellect and maritime technology. This floating fortress of wood and rope was the enabler of epic journeys, carrying not just goods and people, but the very future of exploration. What legendary voyages did these ships and their masters actually accomplish? One of the most staggering tales comes from the Greek historian Herodotus, who recorded a Phoenician expedition commissioned by an Egyptian pharaoh around 600 B.C. The mission was to sail south down the Red Sea and discover if Africa was entirely surrounded by water. Herodotus recounts that the Phoenicians sailed for years, their journey taking them through seasons no Mediterranean sailor had ever seen. They described a point where the sun suddenly stood on their right hand, to the north, a detail Herodotus found unbelievable, but which perfectly confirms they had crossed the equator, rounding the southern tip of Africa. Think of the navigational hurdles they overcame. For months, they were in waters with unknown currents, past coastlines that might offer no fresh water or safe harbor, facing communities that could be hostile. Their survival hinged on the very methods we have explored. By day, they tracked the sun's shifting path, its strange new position a constant reminder of their alien latitude. At night, they would have had to learn an entirely new night sky, with the Southern Cross replacing the familiar pole star as their guide. They practiced dead reckoning for what must have felt like an eternity, their mental calculations the only thread connecting them to a world they knew. They read the swells of an unfamiliar ocean and watched for new species of birds whose habits they had to decipher on the fly. Their successful return through the Pillars of Hercules into the Mediterranean was a feat that stretched the limits of human endurance and skill. Similar, if less epic, voyages were the lifeblood of the era. Minoan traders regularly plied the Aegean, their ships laden with pottery and oil, navigating from Crete to Thera and beyond using star paths and coastal landmarks. These journeys were not just commercial enterprises, they were acts of supreme confidence that expanded the very definition of the known world. Each successful return voyage added another reliable line to the collective mental chart of the ancient mariners, turning the terrifying unknown into a mapped, navigable space. The line between fact and myth in these accounts is beautifully blurred. Were the Phoenicians truly the first? Did they encounter the mythical lands of giant ants or riverbanks of fire that some stories describe? It hardly matters. These legends grew from a kernel of astonishing truth, celebrating a courage and a mastery of the natural world that felt almost supernatural to those who stayed on land. These epic tales were not just about reaching a destination, they were about proving that the world was connected and that human ingenuity could trace those connections. This web of sea roads did more than move goods, it began to weave together the very fabric of human civilization. The bustling ports of the Bronze Age were the internet of their time, humming with a chaotic exchange of far more than just goods. At the docks of Ugarit on the Syrian coast or Knossos on Crete, a Phoenician sailor might barter with a Mycenaean merchant, their hands tracing patterns in the spilled wine to illustrate the shift of a particular current. A trader from distant Anatolia would describe a new star path he had learned from a Cypriot captain, a route that shaved days off the journey to Egypt. These ports were the neural centers where scattered navigational discoveries were collected, compared, and synthesized. The trade networks themselves became the conduits for this precious information. The route from Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley was not just a path for lapis lazuli and carnelian beads. It was a highway for knowledge, carrying detailed understandings of the monsoon winds that could propel a ship across the Indian Ocean. Similarly, the Amber Road connecting the Mediterranean to the cold waters of northern Europe transmitted more than just fossilized resin. It carried stories of the strange, low-hung northern stars and the unique swell patterns of the Atlantic. This constant, informal sharing was vital, but it was also systematized. Multilingual interpreters were among the most valuable people in any port city, their skill with words allowing for the precise translation of a tidal pattern or the description of a safe anchorage. Early merchant guilds and trading families acted as repositories of this hard-won knowledge, guarding their collective understanding of routes and hazards as a trade secret that gave them a critical commercial edge. We see the evidence of this cross-pollination in the tools and terms that begin to appear across cultures. The design for a simple camel-like device for measuring stars could easily travel from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean, adapted by each culture to suit their own needs. Nautical terms for winds or parts of a ship often have shared roots, suggesting that the sailors who used them were learning from one another, creating a shared professional language of the sea. This collaborative exchange did more than just make trade more efficient, it directly spurred innovation. A navigator from one culture might have a brilliant method for dead reckoning, while another had perfected the reading of bird signs. When these techniques met in a busy port, the best practices were combined, refined, and then carried out to sea again, making the next generation of voyages safer, longer, and more ambitious. This interconnectedness reveals a profound truth, that the charting of the ancient world was never the achievement of a single, isolated genius. It was a collective human project, a vast, slow-motion conversation conducted across thousands of miles of ocean. And for the people undertaking these perilous journeys, this hard-won science was always intertwined with a deeper, spiritual understanding of the world they dared to cross. A successful voyage required more than a sharp mind and a sturdy ship. It demanded the favor of the gods. Before the first rope was cast off, a Bronze Age navigator would have made an offering, perhaps pouring wine into the waves as a libation to Poseidon or chanting a prayer to a local sea deity. This was not a mere superstition, but a crucial part of the journey's preparation, a plea for protection from the ocean's unpredictable fury. The sea itself was a divine force, a realm inhabited by capricious gods and spirits who controlled the very winds and currents the sailor depended upon. A sudden storm was not just bad weather, it was the wrath of an angered god. A miraculous rescue from a reef was divine intervention. This spiritual framework transformed the terrifying randomness of the ocean into a system that could be influenced through ritual and respect. Practical navigation was deeply entwined with this belief system. The flight of birds, a critical navigational tool, was also a powerful omen. A heron flying from the left might be a favorable sign, while a hawk circling from the right could signal impending danger, causing a navigator to delay a departure or change his planned route. In some cultures, priests would examine the entrails of a sacrificed animal before a long voyage, searching for divine approval or warning in the patterns of the liver and lungs. These acts of divination provided a crucial, if illusory, sense of control over the uncontrollable. The legendary journeys enshrined in myth, like the Greek tale of the Argonauts, perfectly capture this fusion. Jason and his crew sailed on a divinely blessed ship, the Argo itself, which could speak prophecy. Their navigator was guided not just by the stars, but by the direct counsel of the goddess Hera. When they faced the clashing rocks, it was the goddess's intervention that saw them through. These stories were more than entertainment, they were cultural memory, teaching each new generation that navigating the world required both human skill and divine favor. This spiritual dimension provided immense psychological comfort. For a crew facing weeks of open ocean, the belief that they were watched over by protective gods helped manage the paralyzing fear of the unknown. It fostered a powerful sense of community and shared purpose, binding the crew to their leader, who served as both a technical expert and a spiritual intermediary. The navigator was not just reading the stars, he was communing with the heavens, not just feeling the swells, but listening to the mood of the sea god. This holistic worldview, where faith and science were inseparable, gave ancient mariners the courage to push their ships beyond the horizon, trusting that their knowledge and their prayers would be enough to bring them home. The open ocean was a crucible for the mind as much as the body. For weeks on end, with no land to break the monotony of waves and sky, a sailor's greatest enemy was often his own imagination. The fear of being lost, the creeping dread of a dwindling water supply, the sheer psychological weight of the unknown could paralyze an unprepared crew. This is why the training of a navigator was as much about forging mental resilience as it was about memorizing star paths. An apprentice did not simply learn chants. He was subjected to sensory drills designed to build an unshakable confidence. Blindfolded, he would be taken out to sea and asked to point toward home, learning to feel the direction of the swells and the subtle shifts in wind on his skin. He practiced his art in stormy weather and in dead calms, building a deep, experiential knowledge that no fair weather sailing could ever provide. In traditional Polynesian navigation schools, this training was relentless. Students would be placed in a circle of stones representing islands, and for hours, their master would describe a complex voyage, shifting winds and currents, forcing them to mentally track their position until they could declare, without hesitation, which island they had reached. The goal was to make the mental chart so intuitive that it became a part of their very perception. This grueling process forged what old sailors called a sea sense, a form of intuition that transcended conscious calculation. An experienced navigator might feel a change in the ship's motion or note a peculiar behavior in the clouds and know, with a certainty he could not always fully explain, that a storm was brewing or that land lay just over the horizon. This was not magic, but the subconscious integration of thousands of tiny data points his mind had collected over a lifetime at sea. This profound mental strength was bolstered by the tight-knit community aboard the ship. The navigator's reputation was the crew's anchor. His calm demeanor and absolute confidence were infectious, a vital tool for maintaining morale during a terrifying squall or a prolonged period of drifting. The crew, in turn, placed their complete trust in him, a social contract that lifted the burden of absolute solitude from his shoulders. They knew their lives depended on his skill and his composure. This human element, the combination of rigorous training, cultivated intuition, and communal trust, was the invisible engine of every successful voyage. It was this inner fortitude that allowed them to face the ocean's most brutal physical tests, from howling gales that could tear a sail to shreds to the suffocating stillness of a windless sea. A sudden squall could transform a familiar sea road into a chaos of white water and screaming wind. In these moments, the navigator's true mastery was tested, his mental chart instantly recalibrating for survival. He could not fight the storm, so he worked with it, reading the shifting wind directions to understand the storm's structure and using the powerful swells it generated as a new, if terrifying, compass. A navigator caught in a gale might turn his ship to run with the waves, preventing a catastrophic broach, and use their dominant direction to maintain a rough sense of course, even as they were driven far from their intended path. Fog presented a different kind of peril, a silent, sightless blanket that erased the world. With the sun and stars gone and the horizon vanished, the wayfinder retreated to his most fundamental senses. He would listen intently, not just for the crash of waves on a rocky shore, but for the specific pitch and echo of the sea. The sound of waves reflecting off a cliff face had a different quality than the open ocean's roar, a subtle acoustic clue that land was dangerously near. He might even have a crewman dip a sounding line, bringing up sand or mud from the seabed. The texture and color of that sample could tell him if he was over a continental shelf or near a specific island's unique underwater geology. Unpredictable currents were a constant, invisible threat, a river within the sea that could steal miles from a ship each day. A navigator's dead reckoning was his primary defense, but he was constantly cross-checking it. If his calculations said he should be in deep water, but he started seeing coastal birds or floating vegetation, he knew a current had set him off course and he would adjust. Historical records, like those describing Phoenician voyages beyond the Pillars of Hercules, speak of encountering powerful, unknown currents that forced days of corrective sailing. These were not failures of navigation, but demonstrations of its adaptive core. The entire system was built with redundancy. If the sun was obscured, the stars were the backup. If the stars were hidden, the swells took over. If the swells became confused in a storm, the wind itself became a temporary guide. This flexibility was not innate. It was a skill sharpened by experience and the shared wisdom of countless voyages. The stories of elders who survived a week-long gale or a month lost in the doldrums were studied as intently as any star chant. This deep, practical resourcefulness in the face of nature's raw power reveals a profound intelligence, one that left behind not just legends, but physical proof of their incredible journeys. The true test of any navigation system lies on the seafloor, where history is preserved in the silent hulks of shipwrecks. Off the coast of Turkey, near Cape Gelidonia, archaeologists uncovered a vessel from the late Bronze Age that had carried a fortune in copper and tin. Its cargo was not just metal, but a snapshot of an entire trade network, a single frame from a feature-length journey across the Mediterranean. Among the broken pottery and ingots, they found stone anchors, heavy and practical, used to hold the ship steady in unknown coves while the crew sought fresh water or traded with local communities. Some of the pottery shards bore faded paintings of stars and ships, a decorative motif that may also have served as a simple reminder of the celestial guides for the journey. The ship's personal artifacts are perhaps the most telling, the small, worn items that a navigator would have kept close. While no explicit map was found, the discovery of carefully shaped stones and notched discs raises compelling questions. Could one of these unassuming objects have been a personal camel, a device for measuring a star's height, lost with its owner to the sea? This tangible evidence moves us from legend into the realm of physical science. Further north in Germany, the discovery of the Nebra sky disk created a similar stir. This bronze disk inlaid with gold symbols clearly depicts the sun, the moon, and a cluster of stars interpreted as the Pleiades. Dated to around 1600 B.C., it is one of the oldest known portable representations of the cosmos. While its exact purpose is debated, it proves that Bronze Age peoples were actively mapping the heavens, creating physical tools to understand celestial patterns that were absolutely vital for navigation and timekeeping. The connection may not be direct, but the mindset is identical, a drive to capture the sky's order in a durable, visual form. Yet archaeology has its limits. The navigator's most vital tools, his vast memory and his intimate feel for the sea, left no physical trace. A song cannot be excavated, nor can the sensation of a particular swell be carbon dated. This is where modern science steps in, using residue analysis on pottery jars to trace the origin of oils and wines, thereby reconstructing ancient trade routes with chemical precision. Interdisciplinary studies combine these material finds with oceanographic data on currents and wind patterns, creating computer models that show how feasible certain voyages actually were. The shipwreck's cargo confirms the trade, but the science of the sea itself confirms the possibility. This concrete evidence provides the foundation, but to truly validate these ancient techniques, we must see them in action, brought back to life by modern sailors reviving a forgotten art. The ultimate proof of this ancient science came not from a dusty artifact, but from the living sea. In 1976, a double-hulled canoe named Hokulea set sail from Hawaii to Tahiti, a voyage of over 2,500 miles. Its crew carried no compass, no sextant, and certainly no GPS. Their only guide was a master navigator from a small Micronesian island, Maupiailug, one of the last people on Earth trained in the old ways. For over a month, he stood on the deck, reading the stars, the swells, and the flight of birds, just as his ancestors had. When Hokulea finally sighted Tahiti, its landfall was precise, a stunning demonstration that these methods were not just legends, but a viable, accurate science for crossing the world's greatest ocean. This voyage was a revolution, a living bridge to the Bronze Age navigators who had faced the same vast blue. Modern technology played a crucial role in the validation, but not as a crutch. The canoe was secretly tracked by GPS, and the data revealed something extraordinary. The path Hokulea took was not a straight line. It was a meandering course, constantly adjusted for currents and wind shifts, yet it consistently held to the optimal route. This mirrored the ancient accounts of voyages that spoke of following the path of the sea, a flexible, responsive journey rather than a rigid, predetermined line. Maupiilag's genius lay in his ability to synthesize a constant stream of natural data. He could feel a current pulling the canoe sideways by the way the swell struck the hull, correcting course long before the drift became significant. He taught a new generation that navigation was not about fighting the elements, but about listening to them. His students learned to see the ocean as a dynamic, living map where every clue was interconnected. Satellite imagery and oceanographic studies have since provided the scientific underpinning for what these navigators knew instinctively. We can now see from space the very swell patterns they felt, the massive, slow-moving waves that act as submerged guideposts. We can track the chlorophyll blooms that change the ocean's color, signaling the presence of islands, just as the ancient sailors described. This modern validation does more than confirm history. It hints at a profound and enduring wisdom. In a world reliant on fragile technology, the revival of wayfinding offers a timeless lesson in resilience, a reminder that the most reliable map may still be the one written in the stars, the waves, and the wind. A modern sailor might never need to use a camel, but the principles behind it are more relevant than ever. In an age of digital dependence, a quiet movement is reviving these ancient skills, not to replace technology, but to build a deeper resilience. Sailing enthusiasts and survivalists are now learning to read the ocean's surface for subtle changes in color, to identify key guiding stars, and to feel the direction of swells, transforming a recreational trip into a profound dialogue with the natural world. This practice cultivates a crucial self-reliance, the confidence that if the electronics fail, the ancient compass of the environment remains. Modern navigation systems themselves are built upon this old wisdom. The very concept of dead reckoning is a foundational algorithm in everything from aircraft guidance to autonomous vehicles, providing a continuous best guess position when satellite signals are lost. Emergency protocols for pilots and sailors drill this exact skill, teaching them to fall back on estimated speed and heading, just as a Bronze Age navigator would have done. This formalizes the ancient art of wayfinding into a modern safety net. Educational programs around the globe are ensuring this knowledge does not fade. In Hawaii, the Polynesian Voyaging Society teaches young people to build and sail traditional canoes using only the stars and waves, a powerful initiative that strengthens cultural identity while instilling a fierce sense of environmental stewardship. When you learn to navigate by the health of the coral reefs or the migration patterns of birds, you develop a personal stake in protecting them. These programs teach that the ocean is not a resource to be conquered, but a relative to be understood. The philosophical legacy of these ancient mariners is perhaps their greatest gift to our time. In a world of instant digital answers, wayfinding teaches the profound value of slow, experiential knowledge. It forces a humility before nature, a recognition that our cleverest devices are still subject to the same sun, stars, and storms that guided sailors 3,000 years ago. This old wisdom offers a vital corrective to our modern arrogance, reminding us that true intelligence lies not just in processing power, but in perceptive connection. The enduring power of these techniques points toward a deeper mystery, a hidden layer of understanding about our world and our place within it that we are only just beginning to rediscover. Some of the most compelling clues remain locked away, like the mysterious clay disk of Phaistos. Discovered on Crete, this fired clay disk is covered in spirals of stamped symbols, a unique script that has defied all attempts at translation for over a century. One tantalizing theory suggests these symbols are not a language, but a form of notation, perhaps a navigational almanac recording star paths, prevailing winds, or seasonal sea routes. Imagine a captain holding this disc, his fingers tracing the spirals as a memory aid for a voyage to Egypt. Without a Rosetta Stone to crack its code, we can only wonder if we are holding a Bronze Age captain's log in our hands. This single artifact embodies the field's greatest frustration and its most thrilling possibility, that a fully developed system of oceanic science is waiting to be read, if only we could understand the cipher. Beyond undeciphered texts, massive geographical puzzles remain. How, for instance, did Bronze Age sailors apparently cross the Atlantic, a voyage hinted at in controversial artifact finds? A handful of Roman coins discovered in the Americas, or potential Mediterranean-style shipwrecks in Brazilian waters, spark fierce debate. Were these the result of later, accidental drifts, or evidence of intentional transoceanic journeys that have been lost to history? The sheer scale of such a trip seems unimaginable with their technology, and yet we have learned not to underestimate their skills. The true extent of their world map is still a shadow on the wall of a cave, its full shape unknown to us. To shed light on these shadows, researchers are employing fascinating new tools. Archaeologists are now performing DNA analysis on ancient plant remains like seeds or pollen, found in distant archaeological sites. If a plant native to South America is found in a Bronze Age Mediterranean port, or vice versa, it would provide undeniable biological proof of contact. Anthropologists are diving deeper into the cognitive science of wayfinding, studying how the brain stores spatial information without maps, creating mental models of the ocean that are as real and navigable as a highway. Linguists are using powerful computers to run combinatorial analyses on scripts like that of the Phaistos disk, testing millions of potential linguistic patterns in search of a key. This cross-disciplinary hunt is slowly piecing together a new picture of the ancient world, one that was far more interconnected than we once believed. Similarities in artistic motifs like pyramid construction or specific deity figures found in cultures separated by vast oceans fuel theories of pre-Columbian contact. Could shared flood myths or stories of star-born heroes be distant, garbled echoes of actual encounters between seafarers from different worlds? Each of these mysteries is a thread leading back into the dark, and with every new technological advance, we gain a little more light. The story of Bronze Age navigation is not a closed book, but a live excavation, with new chapters being written by the sea itself with every storm that shifts the sand and reveals a long-lost wreck. What we have already recovered is astounding, but the most thrilling realization is how much remains hidden, waiting just beyond the next wave. These two great schools of navigation, one from the Mediterranean and one from the Pacific, reveal a fascinating divergence in human ingenuity. The Bronze Age sailors of the Mediterranean, like the Phoenicians, operated in a relatively confined sea dotted with islands and coastlines. Their system was a masterful blend of celestial navigation and coastal piloting. They used the North Star and Sun for direction, but a familiar mountain peak or a unique river mouth was never far away, providing constant reassurance and a chance to correct their course. In contrast, the Polynesian wayfinders faced the ultimate challenge, the open Pacific Ocean, where islands were mere specks separated by thousands of miles of empty water. For them, the horizon was everything, and their system became exquisitely tuned to the deep ocean environment. They relied less on a single pole star and more on a mental star compass, a full 360-degree map of the sky where every star's rising and setting point was a bearing. Their most brilliant adaptation was their profound sensitivity to ocean swells, learning to read these deep, rhythmic waves with their entire bodies in a way that Mediterranean sailors, with their frequent landfalls, never needed to master. The environment dictated the tools. The predictable Artesian winds of the Mediterranean allowed for scheduled trade voyages, while the powerful, seasonal monsoons of the Indian Ocean created a natural pendulum, swinging ships back and forth between Africa and India. In the Pacific, the steady trade winds provided a reliable engine, but also demanded a system that could function for weeks without a single visual landmark. Despite these differences, the core principles were universally human, a testament to our shared capacity for observation and memory. Both cultures developed complex oral traditions, encoding navigational data into chants and stories to preserve it across generations. Both used simple, brilliant tools, from the Phoenicians' potential camel to the Polynesians' sacred teaching stones, and ideas did travel. While direct contact between the Mediterranean and Polynesia is unlikely, the principle of the camel for measuring latitude appears in both the Arab world and the Pacific, suggesting that the solution to the problem of north-south position was a cognitive breakthrough that could spread along trade routes and be independently reinvented. This comparative view shows us that there was never one single way to conquer the sea. Instead, different cultures looked at the same sun, the same stars, and the same waves, and from them crafted unique sciences of survival. This diversity of thought, all aimed at the same goal, reveals the incredible adaptability of the human mind when faced with the grandest of frontiers. You can reclaim this ancient confidence on your next walk in the woods. Start by leaving your phone in your pocket and simply observing the sun. Notice its position relative to your own shadow. In the morning, your shadow stretches west, a personal sundial pointing the way. By midday, that shadow shrinks to a small pool at your feet, confirming north in the northern hemisphere. This simple act of tracking your own shadow connects you to the same primary clock the Bronze Age sailors used. Pay equal attention to the life around you. Birds are not just background noise, they are active guides. A steady stream of birds flying in a consistent direction, especially in the evening, often signals a path to water or a safe roosting area, a potential landmark. Even the wind on your skin carries information, a subtle cue to direction that we usually ignore. This practice of multisensory observation is the first and most vital lesson, training your brain to build a mental map based on live environmental data, not a blinking blue dot on a screen. To build this skill, try a simple exercise in a familiar park. Choose a clear night and learn just 2 constellations like the Big Dipper and Orion. Over several weeks, watch how they move across the sky, rising and setting in the same predictable arcs the ancient Wayfinders memorized. This is not about becoming an expert astronomer, but about developing a foundational sense of celestial rhythm. Another powerful drill is to consciously note 3 distinct landmarks on any journey: a peculiarly shaped tree, a specific building, the sound of a stream. Practice retracing your route using only these mental markers. These methods do more than prevent you from getting lost. They fundamentally change your relationship with your surroundings. You become an active participant in the landscape, not just a passenger moving through it. This cultivates a profound sense of resilience and adaptability. When your digital map fails or your battery dies, you are not helpless. You have already been practicing a deeper, more robust form of navigation, one that relies on your own perception and the timeless cues of the natural world. These ancient techniques remind us that true preparedness is not about the technology we carry, but the knowledge we hold within ourselves. Their story is ultimately a map of human potential itself, drawn not on parchment but in the courage to trust one's own senses. We have sailed with these ancient mariners, learning to read the sun's arc, the stars' steady path, the ocean's deep pulse, and the wind's whispered secrets. They did not conquer the sea, they conversed with it, building a global network with nothing but memory, wood, and keen observation. The world they wove together through trade and shared knowledge laid the very foundations for the interconnected globe we know today. But their true legacy is a quiet challenge to our modern souls, a reminder that the most advanced technology we possess is still the human mind, capable of incredible feats of orientation and resilience. Let their profound connection to the world inspire you to occasionally silence the digital noise and navigate by the older, deeper compass of your own intuition and observation. Whether you are finding your way through a forest or through a difficult decision, the Wayfinder's spirit lives on in the simple act of paying close attention. If this journey into the mind of a master navigator has sparked your curiosity, we would love to hear what surprised you most in the comments below, and subscribe to join us as we continue to uncover the incredible ingenuity of our shared past.